Well, hello, friends. How's it going? This is the first episode of this particular podcasty thing that I'm working on. I don't have a huge, schedule or strict thing, but I think our subject is going to be something that you guys might find pretty interesting or relevant, considering what I do, on YouTube, which is we're going to start with the whole neckbeard thing. We're going to start with my whole story of first exposure, what I knew, so on and so forth. But, first off, thank you all for being here. I hope this is a good series. I'm hoping to eventually bring in more people, but for now, it looks like it's just me. So this is kind of a podcast, vlog. It's neither of those things. It's not written, or is it a video? It's just audio, isn't it? Well, either way, let's start with the whole, how did you first discover the neckbeard thing? So the term was something I learned thanks to the internet, but once I basically had a name for it, so much other stuff fell into place. I don't know if everybody has this, but it's akin to finding out the word for your specific gender identity or your specific sexual identity. It's not that you didn't feel it. Like myself, I've always felt that I was bi. I get that. But it was when I learned the word bisexual that it was just like, oh, it all makes sense now. Everything immediately falls into place. And it kind of felt like that. It kind of felt like I didn't have a word to describe what it was until years and years later, and then suddenly I did, and everything made sense. So I guess the question goes to where I originally discovered this. Not the word, but the first neckbeard. And I kind of talked about this in a couple other videos. I'm not sure if anybody even listened to some of those, but it starts with way back when I was in school, basically, back in high school. I was a weird kid growing up. I went to a specific school for kids who have dyslexia, but I eventually transferred into a more local junior high and then high school. And that means something because when you go to a private school and then have to transfer into a public school, or vice versa, as any of you who've ever had to do that know, means that there's going to be a large portion of people who have histories and stuff all together throughout all these years because they were all in school in the same grades and the same classes, more or less. And now you're here and you don't have that. So that's basically where a lot of this started. I was never Mr. Popularity or anything like that. Ironic considering what I do for a living now, right? But I was also really antisocial. Again, ironic considering what I do now. And I just didn't really like large crowds. I didn't fit in with people. I didn't understand half of what they were talking about or their humor or anything. I just kind of went along with what was going on. I was mostly quiet and didn't really know a lot of people. And when I did start meeting people who actually wanted to hang out and talk with me, that's around the time that I discovered the earliest form of the neckbeard crowds that I knew. By far not the earliest form of neckbeards ever. That would be stories I've heard people tell about, knowing people who have beardo tendencies from the 80s, and I would have been a literal child then. So, obviously, I'm just learning this then. And this was the era of, Toonami after school and shit like that. So that tells you around the time period we're looking at. So, I was a nerdy kid. I was into the anime and the video games and whatnot. As one does. And I met a couple people who were also into that. And I didn't really know any neckbeards specific until high school. But I did meet, I guess, some weird people that kind of carried over from that in junior high, as well as some of my best friends even to this day, actually. So it was in high school that I first met We'll call him L, who I've mentioned in a couple of stories and talked about, and he was the first example of a neckbeard that I actually knew. He fit a lot of the stereotypes, but not so much the clothing thing until we actually got to know each other more. See, in this state, pretty much every school, including public schools, have uniforms. You have to wear a certain type of uniform. So it's not just a private school thing to be like, oh, they have to wear khakis and polos. Like, no, literally everybody did. We all did. I have no idea why that's a thing, but it's a thing. And you just have to. So you can't really go off of the typical neckbeard uniform that you expect from them, because we all wore the same clothes. Like, I always hear stories about people describing their times in high school and knowing neckbeards from that era, and it's like, oh, they wear this and they do like that. We didn't have that. All I had was sheer attitude alone. Attitude and interest. That's all I knew. And again, I'm like a nerdy teenager, and anybody who's into that kind of like nerdy circle knows that you can run into neckbeards and not know it until you actually know what a neckbeard is, because they're all in the same circles. That's just a thing. We've talked about this before, where you can be, into anime but not like a creep about it. You can just like certain shows and not be a weirdo about it. And that goes with literally everything. You can like things to a certain extent and not be like obsessed. And that's kind of the problem with things like that, is you eventually run into those people who are, but they don't broadcast that usually right out the gate. So I didn't know that he was like a neckbeard. And I met some of his friends, and it wasn't until years later that I met some of the ones that I had more detailed interactions with. But he was the one who had like more drama than anybody I ever knew. He wasn't just like a neckbeard. He had all this weird drama. He would get into things with friends, and then he wouldn't talk to them anymore, and there was like all kinds of bullshit. And I didn't realize that this was weird until I got older, and I was like, oh yeah, that's actually fucking crazy that there's like constant weird infighting, and why would anyone like that? But again, I didn't have a lot of friends. But halfway through high school is when I moved. And we moved to where it's kind of the same area I live to this day. It's the middle of fucking nowhere, but, family, so you're stuck here. And that's when I went to kind of finish out school around here. And that's when I met the ones who I have more stories about. When I met, like, Z, the guitar guy, and Kay, my on-again, off-again neckbeard friend, who I have not heard from in quite a long time, but I hope he's doing well, actually. He has seemed to, like, change a lot. The other one, I don't know. I've literally haven't spoken to him in years. So, same thing with L, actually. But they were always kind of in the same thing. And I met Mew around the same time that I finished, well, not while in school. I was out of school at that point. I think I was around, like, 22. And it turns out that I had actually met him once before, like years before, like I think when I was 19, but I had no memory of that. So it must have been a very brief encounter. But that was around the time that I basically started hanging around with them, because I didn't really have any other friends out here. And we moved so far from where I was originally from that there was no easy way to just go back and see the friends that I already had. It was always like a process. It's the kind of distance that if you go to see somebody, you have to stay like overnight, because a day trip means you have to get there like really early, and you're going to have to leave before it gets super late because you're going to be driving for like 2 hours. It's that. So I didn't really want to move. I actually kind of liked where we live, but didn't really have much of a choice. So we wind up here. I become friends with these guys because I don't really have a lot of other friends. And that's, my 20s is around where things start to take big differences. Like in my teens, I was always like a little weird kind of punker, rebellious kid, but at the same time, I had to deal with, family and things that you're just not allowed to do and that kind of shit. So once I became like, 18, have my own autonomy, that kind of thing, I went fucking crazy with it. I would come back to hang out with the neckbeards that I knew from my old hometown from time to time, and that would be around the time that the neckbeard thing really started to take off. You know, the miladying, and everybody has the little hat, and it's you have to understand the elegance of the samurai sword and stuff like that. Like, that really started to take off around then. And I thought it was just their weird style. I have said that somewhere in the past there's an image somewhere, and I have no idea where it is or if I even kept it. But they decided, L and several of his friends who I'd met after, because I didn't know that he knew, like, this literal group of neckbeards. What do you call a group of neckbeards? A coven? A gathering? A horde? I'm not sure, but they apparently would go to the mall to, I believe he put it as, quote, scam on some chicks. And I could be wrong about that, but that's the memory I have. And by that, they just, went to the mall, checked out girls who they thought were attractive, and every now and then one of them would work up the nerve to go up to him and be like, "Oh, good evening, milady," and things like that. And they decided at one point, one of them was like, early cell phone camera too, so they were like, "We got to take a picture of all of us together at this gathering that we're doing, and we'll commemorate this," or whatever. I have no idea why the picture needed to be taken, but one of their friends took it, and it reminds me of the image, and I've used it in a couple of videos, where it's like all the guys in like the trilby standing against the railing, all dramatically posing, and they all have their little hats. It was something like that. They were all like very, we gotta do our anime poses, and it was all like, I'm an intellectual. And then like way off to like, I think the right of the picture, there's me. Now, to keep in mind, they're all like either in some form of trench coat or something like it. Some of them I don't think were. They had like the button-up silk shirt because, it's the early 2000s. And they all had the little hats of different varieties of designs, but they would get theirs from like Walmart, so they had like the Ed Hardy skulls and shit on them, so they're like really fucking gaudy looking, even for a trilby. They're really gaudy looking. And all the way to the right, there's Moonhorse. My hair is bright blue at this point. I'm wearing a secondhand leather jacket, so it's got like weird patches and shit all over it. And I believe, my usual attire of like jeans, combat boots, and some kind of weird fucking band t-shirt. I look like somebody who was walking past while the picture was being taken. And they just happened to catch me in frame, which I always thought was really funny, but apparently, like, I found out later that the Neckbeard Coven didn't really like me because I didn't want to, do stuff like them. I wanted to hang out in the arcade and play, like, stupid video games, and they wanted to, like, we have to go to this place because this is where we'll find the females, and I just like, cool, I guess. But this was also around the time that, like, okay, small confession. I hung out with these people because I didn't have any friends, as I've said several times. But neckbeards, not all of them, but some of them can be notoriously homophobic. So I also was still pretending to be straight. It was pretty obvious if you knew me that I wasn't. It was kind of obvious. I was the same one who had, like, I would paint my nails, but they would get mad because it's like, what, you gotta paint them black, it's gonna be macho. And it's like, okay, if you do that at all. And it's like, I one time decided I wanted to paint them like sparkly blue and got in trouble for that with the Neckbeard Coven because they were like, that's gay, bro, it's gay. And it's like, little do they know, But yeah, it was weird because I basically had to pretend to be like super straight around them. But I'm also not a very, I guess you would say sexual person. Like, I have moments or whatever, but like it's not my huge thing. It's not like, oh, I gotta with the sexing time. Like, no. It's not really a thing. It never has been, like, a huge deal for me. I don't understand the mentality of, like Colord, for example, with the proof that I am a true male and things like that. Like, I don't get it. Like, dude, just be you. Who gives a shit? So, I never understood their whole thing, which makes this whole interaction, honestly, like, I mean, honestly, it makes it really funnier now that I look back on it, because I was the one in the group of fucking neckbeards where they'd just be like, "Oh, milady, you are quite voluptuous and attractive," and they would like pressure me into talking to somebody, and I'd just be like, "Nice shirt, I think." So, I didn't do well in these situations. I was always like, "Cool jacket. Okay, I'm gonna go." I think one time I made friends with someone, and they kept pestering me about whether or not, you know, we had to just seal the deal. Really gross, like, straight guy stuff like that. And I was just like, no. Like, we just became friends. I remember, like, this again tells you how many years ago it was. We used to talk on, like, AOL Instant Messenger, and we were just, like, buds. Like, I think the first thing I ever said to this random woman was, like, "I really like your hoodie. It's cool," because it had like a bunch of pins and patches on it. And she was like, "Oh, yeah, you like this band?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, dude." Because I think it was like Iron Maiden or something. And then we just started talking about music. And I think after, because I guess she knew about the group, and was like, "Listen, I don't want you to like get the wrong idea." And I was like, "No, dude, we're just friends. It's cool." And it's like, "Oh, well, shit. Yeah, that's fine." So it's like, yeah, whatever, fuck it. I never really got their whole thing. I don't know what the end game was. I gotta be honest with you, now that I really think about it, like, they would just go to like random women and be like, "Milady," and just like come up with like weird, like, some of them would use like really bad pickup lines, like shit, like I don't know, I can't even really think of one off the top of my head. I don't know, was your dad an astronaut because your ass is out of this world, or some bullshit like that. And I guess they expected it to work, and of course it didn't. Like, of course people were just like, ew. And I really don't know what the end game was, because even if it was to like get these women to think they're super attractive or whatever, they're like maybe 19, 20, at the oldest 21. And we're from, like, a relatively poor area, so maybe two of us have cars. I had one, and I only got it because it was, like, a hand-me-down from my mom, and it was already, like, beat to hell and back. Like, I had to replace all the speakers and do all this work on the engine and shit. So it was not, like, a brand new car. Like, it would have been, I think, at that time, I think it would have been around maybe 2003, 2004. I'm probably wrong on that date, but the car was made in 93. So it wasn't new. It was already like almost a decade old, if not already. So yeah, nobody had like a brand new car. I think the other guy we knew had a 92 Ford Taurus, and one of the front like fenders was a different color from the rest of the car. So yeah, like, we didn't have nice cars, and we were like the ones who had to chaperone them everywhere because they just didn't have a vehicle. So that was the mall experience, and that happened a lot. I remember having to go to the mall with them a lot, which on one hand was like gross. Now I have to hang around these weirdos who were hitting on random women, but on the other hand, it meant that I could go to the arcade, which was still there at the time, and like different stores. I would just kind of sneak off and do my own thing for a while, and then they would like get mad and text oh god, I just remembered my horrible prepaid phone, my shitty fucking track phone, because that's all I could afford, was this piece of shit like track phone. I'm pretty sure it was around that era too, but I had like a really shitty, it may not have been the track phone, that may have been later. I had a really shitty cell phone, I remember that, because I remember it was expensive to do shit like that, to send text messages and shit, and I would get like, whenever they'd blow up my phone, I'd be like, dude, every one of these I have to open, I have to fucking pay for, so don't text me unless you really need something. And they would get all fucking mad, because at the time, we didn't have, like, reasonable, you know, prepaid contracts like we do now. It was like, you either drop, like, a huge chunk of change for this contract, or you buy the track phone that you have to pay money for all the time. And it sucked. But, you know, you did what you had to do when you were fucking broke. It was, oh man, the mall era was a wild time. I remember that. I remember because I also, again, I had the dyed hair, but it was like, it was not good. I had to do it myself, and it was not well done. And also I lived in an area where like the water was really shitty. There's a lot of chlorine in the water, and if you dyed it and then you washed it regularly like I do, because I don't want to be gross, it would wash the fucking dye out because there's so much chlorine in the water. It would just fuck it up and it would come out. So you end up dyeing it over and over. And eventually the main reason I think I stopped dyeing my hair is because I can't fucking afford to keep doing it. That shit was really expensive. So I just quit. But yeah, like, that was, if I'm not mistaken, that would have been around, you know, that time period. So that's the mall era. I might go into more weird periods of my life concerning the neckbeards and the different ones, but this is kind of an introductory to like what may be happening with this. If you have any kind of like subjects that you want myself and some friends who I want to invite onto this later to talk about, send it to my subreddit r/Moonhorse Stories. You can just drop it as a note. I need to make like a permanent thing, but you can put it as a note. You can, like, you know, just make sure you label it as a, you know, subject for whatever, and I'll check it out. If you enjoyed this and want to check out, you know, my YouTube channel, since this is being released early, usually these are, on Spotify, it's Moonhorse the Horse. I know, a very creative name. On YouTube, that is me. I read stories about neckbeards, thus given the obvious thing we were talking about. I know, I'm real good at this whole thing, aren't I? I'm such a fucking professional. Anyway, I have a Ko-Fi and a merch store, and if you'd like to check those out, maybe donate something, maybe get a t-shirt, I would greatly appreciate it, but I understand if you can't. Times are hard for everybody. Don't worry about it. Every weekend, I do live streams on that same YouTube channel, so you can, you know, check those out. They're weird, honestly. Everything I do is a little bit weird. I have my own Discord where me and all my strange friends hang out. And, yeah, thanks for checking out this first episode. I'm hoping you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. So, have a good week, everybody. Goodbye.